Yu-Gi-Oh! Predicted Nazca line discoveries. Entertainment inadvertently predicting the future is a phenomenon that's been observed for as long as mass consumption and preservation of media has been available. Looking back and seeing when creators were dead on with predictions, conscious or not, has kept top 10 sites humming along for years. Like when Super Mario predicted 9/11, or Godzilla predicted 9/11, or JoJo predicted 9/11. Destroying the Twin Towers used to be hilarious. Until one day. And while Dracosack popping Skyscraper is pretty close, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a much better example for predicting the future, tying back to a centuries-old world wonder. The Nazca lines are some of the most captivating creations in human history, created over the course of 1,000 years by the indigenous Nazca civilization of Peru. The Nazca lines are geoglyphs depicting whales, condors, trees, reptiles, and hundreds of other objects, numbering now at over 700. What's most interesting is their sheer scope and purpose. The Nazca lines are enormous, with their full scope only visible from a vantage point, which is nowhere to be found in the wide-open plains that some geoglyphs are found in. Their designs are far too coordinated and planned out to have been done haphazardly, so how would they have been able to carve these into the ground without an aerial view? Their purpose has also been debated for a long time, with some claiming them to be for spiritual purposes, while others say they were used to mark territories for different groups. Whichever it was, they've endured as a wonder and mystery of the world for thousands of years. And with a mythology all their own, it was only a matter of time before they bled into pop culture. Finally onto Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Nazca lines served as the inspiration for the Earthbound Immortal archetype, a series of giant monsters with pure black bodies that are illuminated by glowing lines, with each one representing a different real-world Nazca line. Earthbound Immortal Kapaka Apu is based on the astronaut geoglyph, Asalapisku, which, bonus fact, is one of, if not the only card in the game with a non-capitalized word in its name. Anyway, that's based on the hummingbird geoglyph, and Wirikocha is based on the condor geoglyph. These served as the ace monsters for the Dark Signers in their arc of the 5Ds anime, reanimated corpses powered by their immortals, who sought to destroy the Signers and plunge the world into darkness. After their defeat, though, there was one final Earthbound Immortal, said to be the most powerful of them all, so strong it took the Crimson Dragon to a standstill in their fight. This was Earthbound Immortal Red Nova, and his associated Nazca line was the Snake. He attempts to steal Jack Atlas's body for his resurrection before Jack is able to counter him and seal Red Nova inside of his Red Dragon Archfiend, evolving him into Red Nova Dragon. The most interesting part, though, is with Red Nova's associated Nazca line. See, the Snake Nazca line isn't real. Unlike every other one, the writers decided to go with a wholly original Nazca line that doesn't exist, and further didn't base Red Nova's design on a snake due to the lack of a real-world analog. For the next 4 years after the Red Nova arc in 2010, this would remain true. Until in 2014, a sandstorm had been kicked up in Peru that revealed dozens of undiscovered geoglyphs, including a llama, bird, and lion geoglyph. The biggest one, though, was a nearly 200-foot-long snake Nazca line in the Nazca Desert. This means that 5Ds didn't make up a new Nazca line. Instead, they lucked into making one based on one that had never been discovered. Maybe the biggest coincidence in the entire franchise. Now they're hedging their bets and made the Earthbound servants only original Nazca lines. Come on, baby, I got a good feeling about Gremlina! Cory Roca. Yu-Gi-Oh!, like any other competitive game, can become a cult of personality. A player who's good at the game is one thing, but a player who's fun to watch is a whole other ballgame. It's the reason so many of the popular players in this game, like Jesse Cotton, Joshua Schmidt, and Steven Trifanowski, also have careers as YouTubers and streamers. Even players who don't lean so heavily into social media can build up a following based on how they play the game. Jeff Leonard is a perfect example of this. Even with him only being a player without any social media, he's still famous and beloved in the community, despite his best efforts. Another great example is Forbes, a player who mains the less-than-meta Suship deck. Pet deckers are common in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but Suship seems like kind of an odd horse to hitch your wagon to. It's not an especially strong deck, without a heavy splash from a deck like Ryziel or Primite, so why do people care about this guy playing a bad deck? Well, Forbes made Suship his entire personality and arrives to events in full sushi chef cosplay, while playing on a wooden board like he was serving sushi. Loads of people in the community know and love the Suship guy, and it's earned him a nice reputation. However, the other side is when a reputation turns sour and people start to turn against and even hate certain players. It can be for a lot of reasons. You could be Chris Lofton and be a total prick to everybody you meet and act surprised when Konami bans you for it. You could be Roy St. Clair, whose cheating stories and American Championship title made him a real-life Bandit Keith. You could even be Luke Von Karma. One story, though, is way more serious than all the other ones, because it involves a complicated web of escalating events that ends with a player getting banned, and even more people nearly dying. Cory Roca is a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Player with a really impressive record to his name. A bunch of high-placing finishes across multiple years, especially in 2016, which culminated in the next year with a win at YCS Atlanta with Paleo Frogs, in the height of Zodiac format. However, more people probably know him for his controversies in various online spaces, starting with him sending unsolicited dick pics. Of the 4 people we know of who received them, 2 didn't show interest, and he was outed as a sex pest. This isn't hearsay either. Cory himself admits to sending the pictures in an interview with Mega Capital G.
There was a lot of ruckus about me sending dick pics. Now, I did send dick pics. I'm a guy. These girls were of age.
This is already enough to ruin a career. Pro player Alessandro Di Patria pretty much never showed his face in the space again after he made rape threats towards a woman, which only ended up with him getting clowned on and called a giraffe. In Cory's case, though, this was just the spark that lit the fuse. Eventually, the story reaches Zodiac Duelist, and wow, you know we've gotten deep when we're finally bringing up Zodiac Duelist. You know that scene in Star Wars where Han mercilessly guns down innocent family man Greedo McClunky? And how the bar is filled with, like, demons and werewolves? That's kinda like Zodiac Duelist. It's a Facebook community known to host some of the worst people the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community has to offer. And Cory Roca had his home phone number leaked to this community. What's more, Cory didn't live on his own at this point. He had actually moved in with his grandma, who was in poor health, and he was taking care of her. So it wasn't him absorbing the brunt of the abuse, it was his grandma. In retaliation, Cory would go online and make the now-deleted comment, "I will literally bury all of you. I will bring a gun to the next event and take down names. I will literally put holes in your chests until I feel better. Then the police will come and take me away, and I'll do life. But you'll do life in the ground." This was a mass shooting threat. He was going to go to the next available YCS and start killing people until the police stopped him. This would result in Cory Roca getting an immediate lifetime ban. Oh wait, no it didn't. He wouldn't get banned until a year after his YCS win. Alter Reality Games, which was a popular tournament organizer, banned him on the spot, and he would leave the community almost totally and open a card shop in Delaware that he's running to this very day. Now, what to make of all of this? On the one hand, his grandma was in poor health, he was being harassed non-stop. I understand saying something stupid in the heat of passion. On the other hand, it's a mass shooting threat. I can acknowledge that Cory was in a crappy situation and still think he handled that crappy situation in the stupidest way he could. Either he was just talking tough online, which wasn't going to do anything but give Zodiac more ammo against him, or he was going to kill people! And there's the fact this all started because he was being a pervert and sending dick pics to people who did not want to see his penis, and it's hard to feel a due amount of sympathy to excuse the mass shooting threat. This also brought in people who tried to excuse his by saying how impressive he was for winning with paleo frogs and topping a YCS. These are the dumbest bastards on the planet, and every time somebody uses being good at playing a game to excuse being a fucking freak, an angel hangs itself using its halo. While I shouldn't be, I was surprised to see just how much Corey's story has faded into dust within the Yu-Gi-Oh community. There are no posts about this that have survived, and the only reference to Corey Roca I can find consistently is my post to the Yu-Gi-Oh subreddit for this very Iceberg, which is all wrong information about him. This is why we do research, kids, 'cause being wrong is the easiest thing in the world. Cancelled Duel Monsters vs. GX movie. You can get over a lot in this life. But one thing that nobody gets over is that one thing from your childhood that you hated so much, you irrationally carry that hatred into adulthood. When I was a kid and Ed, Edd and Eddy had ended, they premiered a new show called Stormhawks around the same time. It might have even been like a week after the cancellation. In my kid mind, I thought they had cancelled Ed, Edd and Eddy to make way for Stormhawks, and so I hated that show more than I hated anything else. Kazuki Takahashi had a memory just like that, which would not just lead to a cancelled movie, but a huge upheaval in the ongoing series of the time. One of Takahashi's inspirations as a mangaka was Go Nagai, one of the most influential authors of all time. To shorten his list of accolades for the sake of convenience, he's the guy behind Devilman and Manzinger Z, two of Takahashi's favorite stories. When it was then released in 1973, the Manzinger Z vs. Devilman movie was something Takahashi looked forward to for months. But when the film did premiere, he slowly figured out it wasn't Manzinger fighting Devilman, but Devilman and Manzinger fighting together to take down a villain. Takahashi was so pissed off by the false advertising that years later, when he had the chance to do so, he decided to do that concept right. After the conclusion of Duel Monsters and into the production of GX, Takahashi had begun writing a movie that would see the heroes of both series dueling against each other. The movie would have seen Jaden and friends traveling to Domino City, where a brand new evil duelist would have pulled the strings of both him and Yugi to trick the two into dueling against each other. This would have weakened both duelists to a state that the new evil duelist could have taken them out, ending with the two working together to take him down. The movie never entered serious production thanks to a major sword hanging over the film's head, the Pharaoh Atem. Takahashi was adamant on keeping Atem dead. The whole meaning of the ending of Duel Monsters is finality, growing up, moving past the past while keeping its memory close to keep you going. The very last move of the final duel of the original series was negating the effect of Monster Reborn, stopping the Pharaoh from prolonging his life any more than he had to. He was free to rest. He didn't have to fight anymore. To undo that just for the sake of a film gimmick would betray the story he poured his heart into, and it gave Takahashi a lot of grief. That's why Atem, up until Dark Side of Dimensions, never returns. The final duel of GX is solely Jaden versus Little Yugi, up until the very end, which is just part of the reason many people write off the ending as a dream. Bonds Beyond Time takes place before the ceremonial duel, which means he's free to appear. His return in Darkside is as brief as it can be, and the entire rest of the movie is about how Atem should not come back. The question was enough to put a stop to Takahashi's planning for the movie, and it ultimately stopped any serious production. But the ideas didn't go to waste. I've said before that Takahashi did have an amount of involvement in the spin-off animes and their stories, and it seems like the ideas from the cancelled movie were rolled into Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. See, the evil duelist who was going to pit the heroes against each other wasn't just a concept. He had a name and a deck theme. Takuma Sayo and his tarot card-themed deck. This is the exact description of Season 2 Big Bad, Sartorius Kumar, down to the same Japanese name. The villain wasn't the only scrapped element of the film to be reworked. One of the more memorable parts of Season 2 of GX was the mini Domino City arc. During this, the GX gang takes a field trip to the city of legendary duelists, and gets wrapped up in a plot by a group of dueling hitmen sent by Sartorius' sister, Serena, each one of them using a different monarch monster. This pretty closely follows the pitch idea of the gang going on a field trip, simply swapping out the duel monsters characters for the new monarch duelists. The arc itself feels like an anime movie recap arc, like the first 2 arcs of Dragon Ball Super, the sort that happened completely divorced from the ongoing plotline. This arc is the introduction to Sartorius having a sister, and she's only worked into the story in retrospect, showing up in the duel between Sartorius and Jaden, and then later on during the final season. While the idea of a crossover movie would be revisited in the next series with Bonds Beyond Time, it wouldn't be as a versus movie, and would instead take the same path that disappointed Takahashi so much, the 3 heroes working together. Good work, Takahashi. Look at yourself. You became the Go Nagai of your time. Vrains' original ending. Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains is in a very complicated spot of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. It's the final ever show produced to this point that follows the formula set out in Duel Monsters. Since then, the only anime produced are either for the new Rush cards, or are based on the cards themselves like the Albaz anime. It's also the final Gallop era show, an animation studio who helmed the franchise for decades. At a point, this was the only animation the studio was putting out. It was put out at a time when the game's health was at an all-time low. And frustratingly, a lot of cards people hated came from Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. Goki, Firewall Dragon, Gumblar Dragon, Magic Cylinders! The anime itself was also a complete roller coaster in terms of quality, with super high peaks for the animation, character writing, and development. And then you'd get a clip show 13 episodes in, and half the sidecast were made to look like complete failures. Blue Angel might take the crown for the most disrespected female duelist in the entire franchise, which is a title that does come with 15 free therapy sessions. The production of Vrains was likely frayed behind the scenes, for reasons we'll talk about soon, but those problems reverberate throughout the entire show. One place this was especially seen was in the final duel of the series. The end of Season 2 left I, the main character's little buddy, as the only remaining Ignis, a species of advanced, free-thinking AI. Grief-stricken and influenced by the previous villain, Lightning, I ran simulation after simulation to try to find a way for Ignis and humans to coexist. Only to find there was one constant he couldn't change. Either him or Yusaku had to die. Deciding then and there, I planned on ending his own life in order to preserve Yusaku, and so instigated the final arc as a way to force Yusaku to take him out permanently. This makes it a really grim twist on the classic ceremonial duel that's become a staple of the franchise. Yusaku pretty much having to mercy kill I, who's given up on living, if it means his best friend will stay safe. The simulation scenes themselves are also super intense, with Yusaku and I standing alone in the ruins of society, the world having been demolished by the conflict that would take place if I doesn't die. The only thing is that if the initial ending for Vrains had been gone with, these wouldn't have been simulations. This was revealed by a writer for Vrains on their personal website, which revealed loads of production information about Vrains and how things were supposed to play out. It was actually decided on super early that I was going to be the final boss of the series, for the exact reason I mentioned, inverting the partner duel that had ended out Duel Monsters and Zexal. However, the battle wasn't going to be to prevent the destruction of humanity, but instead take place after its destruction. Vrains' ending was supposed to have I and Yusaku dueling on a destroyed Earth, after I's forces and the humans had practically wiped each other out, with all that remained being the two friends at the center of all of it. The duel wouldn't have had any purpose, no reward at the end. There were no battles left to win, just what was left around them. The duel would have been a game for the sake of a game, before they went their separate ways to live out the rest of their lives on a destroyed planet. Now, the reason you might have intuited from that description about why it was changed was because that ending was depressing as hell. And since it was the final Gallop-era show, might not have been the best thing for its legacy to say the setting was destroyed and nothing remained. It wasn't considered for a long time, but it's that it was considered at all, that it's the only alternate ending named, and that it was worked into the show in the form of the simulations that makes it so interesting. If things had changed just a little bit, and a lot of people got a lot more comfortable with a bad idea, we could have had the final Gallop-era show ending Hotline Miami 2 style, and necessitating a full-on reboot of the series. It would have made for a really unique ending, but I think the ending that we get, with the ambiguity that is there, is better for the overall show and series. The Barian Observer. Now we get to cover a topic so minute yet so interesting that I have a whole 3 sentences to work with. The second season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal feels like a response to the problems with early Zexal. I have no proof of that, and I'm sure that this was a case like with I always being intended to be the final bad guy. This was always the intended course. A lighter, GX-style first season, before raising the stakes to a degree they've never been raised to before. 7 of the familiar supporting cast that we've gotten to learn about and appreciate over the course of the series, all the way up to the Joey analog of the show, are revealed to have been evil space aliens the entire time, bent not on world domination, but rather the preservation of their species. Everybody in the supporting cast, save for Kite's family and Tori, are killed by the Barians, as Yuma is all that's left to fight off an invasion that threatens reality itself. We get the dramatic backstories for characters like Vector, Nash, and Rio. The entire Vector duel itself is one of the most intense duels in the entire series. It feels like a completely different show. The only evidence of a major rewrite, though, comes from the NOS website, which, while it was airing, would post previews of Zexal episodes. These were usually as vague as possible to keep from spoiling the upcoming events of episodes, but episode 130 and 131 hold an interesting bit of cut content. In it is mentioned a character named Alco, the Barian Observer. This was a character Dr. Faker would have told his son Kite about in order to get him to seek him out to help find a way to beat the Barians. Alco would have provided a card called the Closed 8, which would have been pivotal in beating Mizar in Kite's upcoming duel. Alco only exists in the previews for episode 130 and 131. He's never mentioned in the show. The card the Closed 8 is never mentioned or shown anywhere. And the card that ends up saving Kite on the moon is the Number Hunter's very own number 62, Galaxy Eye's Prime Photon Dragon. What role Alco could have served is entirely speculation. His role as a Barian Observer, and Faker referring to him as a young boy, makes me think he would have been a childish third party who wasn't Barian, astral, or human, that had a greater power than all of them. He could have even been the parallel to Dawn 1000 for Astral World, like Dawn 1000 is for the Barians, only now making his appearance now that things have gotten out of hand. As for why he was removed from the show, I think they realized that introducing a character even higher than the Barians, when that role was already filled by Dawn 1000, was too much. With Numeron Dragon already set to play a big role, I think adding a third god, whose only job seemed to have been giving Kite a get-out-of-duel-free card, was seen as a bad idea. This wasn't even the only character removed from Zexal, but left in an episode preview, as there was planned to be another spirit named Proto, a spirit who wanted to eliminate the numbers as they could only be used for wickedness. The duel that would have taken place between him and Yuma would have been the introduction to the manga-exclusive Shining Numbers, which was Yuma's answer to Chaos Xyz summoning. Just like with Alco, he's only ever mentioned in episode preview scripts and is never seen in the actual show. The duel that would have happened between him and Yuma would have been around episode 124 and 125, which is when the Barians launch their attack and start taking out the supporting cast. I guess it would have given Yuma something to do while the invasion was happening, but just like with Alco, it feels like they realized there was too much going on, and saying there's yet another spirit disconnected from both Astral World and Barian World was too much. Now all Alco and Proto exist as is as interesting footnotes in Zexal's history. Arc 5 problems because of Dark Side of Dimensions, fake. Arc 5. In one word, messy. In 1032 words, Arc 5 is a series that had all the promise in the world, but time after time found ways to piss away all of its goodwill. There was potential. Its hook of alternate dimensions is engaging and should lead to a lot of good stuff. It's the first series to give characters more fleshed out archetypes, like DDs, super heavy samurais, Performa Odd Eyes. It made duels more mobile without the hook of motorcycles. But it is a one step forward, two steps back kind of show. The early promise is there, and I think it's a good show to a point, but at that point, it starts to nosedive in quality to the point of burning up all the goodwill it built up. My brother used to joke with me that the whole series was propped up by Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, because after that card is destroyed, in a series best duel with fan favorite Shay, using a beautifully animated final attack with Satellite Cannon Falcon, the show starts to go to hell in a handbasket real quick. The Synchro Dimension arc is where some of the show's worst moments are, culminating in maybe the worst received episode of the whole franchise, Arc 5, Episode 92. Episode 92 is the culmination of a duel that had been built up for 3 episodes beforehand with Barrett, a nobody jobber, handing Yuya his ass over and over again. Barrett uses a Beastborg deck that locks down the opponent's field, and Yuya had no idea how to beat it. He couldn't get out. He was going to lose. That was until a third guy named Sergei shows up, takes Yuya's ass from Barrett, and also hands it to him. What made this episode so frustrating wasn't the fact that Yuya was losing. God knows he's done enough of that up to this point to prepare us. It's the fact that this was the culmination of getting back the Bracelet Girls. Yuya has spent the entire series trying to get back Zuzu and her different dimension counterparts. This seemed like it was finally going to be the moment it happens, and it does, but then they're immediately taken away again by Sergei. In the Japanese fandom at least, it was a turning point against Arc 5 that made a lot of people tune out. With the show so sharply declining in quality around this time, people were left wondering why the show had taken such a sudden hit. Well, that's when dates started lining up, with the February release date of episode 92 and the April release date of Dark Side of Dimensions. Fans began assuming the production of DSOD was responsible for the dip in quality in Arc 5. The writing and animation were continuously getting worse because the best talent working on the show was stuck on Dark Side, and the reshuffling is the best explanation for the odd choices made in the show's later seasons. It would even extend to and explain the troubled development of Vrains. No healthy show has to do a clip show every 15 episodes. For a long time, this was considered the reason for the woes of Arc 5, but doing a little digging shows more than a few holes. First off, the names shared between Arc 5's credits and Darkside's credits aren't enough to throw a show out of whack. Big names that were in both the credits of Arc 5 and Dark Side of Dimensions include creature designer Honda Seiji, producer Jitsumatsu Teruaki, episode director Muto Kimiharu. These are certainly names, but it's not like the entire animation staff was shifted over to work on Dark Side. Dark Side instead featured a lot of animators who weren't working on Arc 5 and instead had worked on older series, namely Takahiro Kagami, who would serve as the movie's director. Did losing all that staff help? No, but it wouldn't have been enough to derail the entire show. Even more than that, the actual problem with Arc 5 had nothing to do with Darkside's production. Missing from that list of shared credits is any of the writing staff, and the problems people have with Arc 5 can largely be chalked up to the writing. The animation towards the end isn't stellar, but it was passable. The story is where people had problems. Yuya is a weak protagonist. He rarely gets impressive wins and feels carried by action cards, which act as deus ex machinas, no not those ones, that keep him from losing. What is Yuya's impressive win? What's the win that solidifies him as a better duelist than when he started the series? Yugi beat Pegasus, Jaden beat the Sacred Beasts, Yusei beat the Dark Signers, and Yuma beat Faker. What's Yuya's big win that puts a cap on a part of the story? He beats the quiz guy, and the cook guy, and the flower cardian guy, and after that just duels people to a draw about 10 times in a row. Yuya's character writing is also incredibly frustrating because he's entirely one note. He's obsessed with smiles. Every conversation comes back to smiles. Oh, these children are starving? Probably because they're not smiling enough. The duel writing as well gets extremely repetitive after a few games, when they repeatedly have to explain how piercing damage works. You still take the damage became a meme in the Yu-Gi-Oh community for a reason. The supporting cast has absolutely nothing to do. Either you're Reiji or Shay, who gets to actually duel people, or you're everybody else. You'd be lucky to be a Gong Strong, who loses to every named duelist he fights after episode 57. The show just languishes in pointless duels for a lot of the endgame. When the show should be wrapping up and getting to the big fight with Zark, Yuya's fighting a pirate guy and the Battle Beast. When Gladiator Beasts showed up, I smiled. When they brought their bags, the smile faded. The twist that Yuya is the final boss after becoming Zark should work, but the show that follows is a miserable experience of watching a boss character pull trap cards out of his ass to avoid losing. Yuya's Chaz tier rival Sawatori is able to duck and weave around every known effect that Zark has on his field and convincingly win the duel, until Zark reveals he had an extra trap in his back pocket just to make him auto-lose the duel. Any one of these plot beats would have been planned out months ahead of their air date, and just like with Crow Hogan the Dark Signer, it wouldn't have been possible to change them so quickly. Just like with Dark Signer Crow Hogan, it feels better to try to push the failings of a show you like onto unforeseen consequences, but that's just not the case here. DSOD's production likely had very little effect on Arc 5. You wanna know what did have an effect on Arc 5 though? Symphogears! Yeah, remember that? The show with the Scrap Fist reference? It had a negative effect on Arc 5's production thanks to Katsumi Ono, the very director who put in that reference. Ono had left his stamp on both franchises and had obligations to fill out for both, meaning that he would have been working on Symphogears GX, weird, and Arc 5 at the same time. Wanna hazard a guess as to which arc he predominantly directed? The Synchro Dimension arc, where the entire show went to shit. So if you need to blame any anime for the Battle Beast arc, it's Symphogears, not Darkside. Also, since this was going to get its own entry later on, but I eventually realized there wasn't enough basis to make a whole entry for, I want to quickly touch on Magician of Hope. This is a V-Jump promo card that's extremely odd as far as anime cards go, because it's a crossover card. Before this, the only crossovers that would be done between cards would be in the same series. That's how you'd get a card like Dark Cavalry or Shooting Star Dragon TG Expansion. But Magician of Hope is between Zexal and Arc 5. The reason this is worth noting is because Zexal is really popular in Japan, almost as popular as Duel Monsters, and Arc 5 is not. During the airing of Arc 5, the video site Nico Nico would keep a running tally of the top 10 worst anime episodes as rated by their fans. And during Arc 5's airing, all 10 spots were Arc 5 episodes. The theory goes that Magician of Hope was printed to try to get people who were into Zexal, but not into Arc 5, to try out the new cards, because hey, it's a Zexal card, And an Arc 5 card. You like one of those, you can have the other. You like mac and cheese, you'll eat your Brussels sprouts. Cyber Dragon MF03-EN010. The rarest Yu-Gi-Oh card of all time is a discussion that's been had a lot in the community. At the very least, we know there is no such thing as a one-of-one card, simply because Konami can't let that sort of thing happen. Whenever a new, official Yu-Gi-Oh card is made, they print at least one copy to keep in reserve at a card vault in Konami headquarters. That's the one that acts as a reference for the card's code, and so they always have a copy on hand. Even cards like Tyler the Great Warrior, or one-of-one prize cards like Duel Link's Dragon or the normal monster Blackluster Soldier have to have duplicates out there in order to have a version of the card on file. So for a card to truly be the rarest of all time, it has to be because of a circumstance out of Konami's control. Two examples of exactly that are with two Neos cards, funny enough. Due to errors when printing the first edition runs of South Korea's Premium Pack 6, the card Neos Wiseman was printed as a fusion monster instead of a main deck monster. Ironically though, this misprinted version ended up being more accurate to the anime than the actual version of Neos Wiseman we were stuck with, as in the anime it's a fusion of Yubel and elemental hero Neos, where in the real game you summon it by tributing those two monsters on the field. The other Neos card that was infamously printed wrong was a version of Chaos Neos, and you couldn't ask for a bigger misprint. This was specifically a misprint of the Ghost Rare variant of Chaos Neos, already insanely hard to pull, but the name would also be printed wrong to now be Rainbow Dragon. This variant from Gladiator's Assault was already extremely rare, going for over $1,000 online. But you could double that and then some by going back to Rainbow Dragon's original pack, Tactical Evolution. Here, you had an extremely small chance of pulling a Ghost Rare Rainbow Dragon, and an even smaller chance than that the Rainbow Dragon's artwork would be replaced with Chaos Neos. He gets downgraded to an effect monster, but the dignity is worth it for a price increase of over $5,000. Effect Monster Ghost Rare Rainbow Chaos Neos Dragons go for that much. But if you're not bargain hunting, you might pay over $10,000 for one. While that's clearly not even within spitting distance of Tyler the Great Warrior's $300,000 price tag, I don't think it's wrong to say Tyler is a bit of a special case and should be in a league of his own. Other prize cards, like Crush Card Virus and Gold Sarcophagus, carried multi-$1,000 price tags, but Chaos Neos in misprinted form is higher value than a playset of some of those cards. But what could get more rare than a ghost? How about a myth? There's a series of cards released in such an obscure way that are so hard to find to this day, it's speculated on whether or not some of them even exist at all. Cast your minds back to 2005, and if you were watching the brand new Yu-Gi-Oh series of the time, GX, you might have seen a commercial advertising brand new action figures to go along with the monsters from the show. Elemental Heroes, Water Dragons, Chthonian Soldiers, all released by Mattel, all including a card in parallel rarity matching the toy you got. These would make them some of the rarest variants of these cards to ever exist. And the figures would be released in 3 waves. Wave 1 was simply Elemental Hero Thunder Giant. Wave 2 was More Heroes, Water Dragon, and Cyber End Dragon. And then finally, Wave 3 would be even more heroes, because even in toy form hero oversaturation is a problem, and a few other key monsters. Those key monsters included Cyber Dragon, Ancient Gear Golem, Blackluster Soldier, Elemental Hero Clayman, and Winged Karibo level 10. These 5 cards make up a group of some of the rarest Yu-Gi-Oh merchandise to ever exist, and by association, the rarest cards of all time. While versions of every other toy in the line have been documented, in box and with their cards, these 5 are all in various states of obscurity. The whole search got kicked off one day on Pojo when a user named Maykite was talking about his journey to collect every possible variant of Cyber Dragon, in all the rarities he had ever been printed in. The Mattel toy version, coded MF03-EN010, was nowhere to be found, and digging from the players on Pojo revealed that Cyber Dragon, unlike all the other toys in the line, was only available at Sears. Along with only being available at f***ing Children's Wonderland Sears, the already scarce production of the figure meant it was impossible to find a Cyber Dragon with the card in the packaging. 2020 would be when the case was finally cracked, when a guy named Kevin L. posted to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Subreddit revealing loads of the MF03 series of cards, including the core elemental heroes and a Cyber Dragon. These photos that Kevin took were, and still are, the only proof that MF03 Cyber Dragons exist, alongside a UK-based buyer's guide that also listed it alongside a Blackluster Soldier. Speaking of which, I didn't mention Blackluster Soldier among the toys with no cards. That's because there is no Blackluster Soldier toy known to exist. It was featured on the back of the packaging of other MF03 figures, but no version of it has ever turned up. It's not uncommon for toy lines to feature cancelled figures on final packaging, but with how Cyber Dragon turned up out of thin air, it's not impossible that it might exist somewhere. And if you think you might have the $1 million prize, don't get too excited. A lot of false sightings have happened because there is a Blackluster Soldier, but printed back during the original Duel Monsters line, not the MF03 version, and certainly not with a card. We still don't have a Cyber Dragon with the card in packaging to prove that's how they were distributed, but that's not even the end of the questions when it comes to this card. Remember how I mentioned the buyer's guide? Well, that lists the card code for BLS as 009, and Cyber Dragon is 010. Meanwhile, the card we have lists Cyber Dragon as 009. For all I know, that's a mistake on the part of the buyer's guide, because it's unlikely they would have an actual copy of the card, but even if I was correct, I wouldn't go voicing it, because that means somebody spent $30,000 on a fake! Kaiba Corp Virtual Dueling System. Released back in 2007, the Kaiba Corp Virtual Dueling System was a brand new piece of technology, one of the first ever widely available online dueling simulators for Yu-Gi-Oh! Developed by fans. We're spoiled for choice now between Dueling Network, Omega, Edo Pro, and of course Master Duel. But way back when Strike of Neos had just released, and the housing bubble was plumping up, the idea of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Without having to look somebody in the eye was unthinkable. The software had been in development since at least 2004, and was developed by a 4-person team, each one going by a different anime character's name, with the main developer being Seto Kaiba himself. Miraculously, the page that detailed all of this development history has endured on kaibagaming.net, where he details how the game came to be, mixing both actual development history with what seems to be in-character asides as Seto Kaiba himself. This makes discerning fact from fiction a little hard, like when he claims the original site had to be taken down due to an influx of fangirls. With help from the other developers, the original beta for the game would be released in 2007 with a 400-card-deep card pool, and would be in a unique position in regards to the burgeoning internet. The game's early popularity was thanks to the contribution from a pre-established online community, the Tag Duel YouTube scene. I say that the online simulators were the only way to play the game digitally, but the Tag Force games also filled that role. Whether it was character duels or actual games, the Tag Force games filled that niche for people without stable internet connections. So a community grew around the games for the purposes of making videos, which made up a hefty part of the early Yu-Gi-Oh! Scene. When KC dropped, these bigger channels would slowly figure out about it and post about it, showcasing the ease of use and availability to a bigger audience than forum word of mouth could. Soon a large community would form around the simulator that would subdivide itself into various groups. A group on the main forum, hosted on the same site as the download, a group of splinter forums themed around the various houses at Duel Academy, a regular tournament scene, YouTube videos cataloging them. In the early days of the internet, the Kaiba Corp virtual dueling system was the biggest hub for members of the community to play. The simulator itself was rudimentary, but expectedly so. Kaiba and the team had to build it without the luxury of a reference point that newer simulators like Omega have. Features like automatic play and a robust card pool weren't standard. Instead, players had to manually enter every command taken in the game, and instead of an add or subtract function for life points like with Dueling Book, KC had you entering a command line to perform these functions. In order to even access the game's server, you would have to download a third-party VPN called Hamachi that did the work of actually connecting one player to another. The community for a long time was flourishing. Eventually, those different Academy forums would start a global ranking system that would rank each forum against each other. A system popular enough to get incorporated into the main program itself as the Kaiba Corp Team Academy universe. However, since this is likely the first time you're ever actually hearing of this simulator, you'd rightly assume something went wrong. If you were unlucky enough to be playing KC at the wrong time, you'd run into a user named Kira. Kira would enter rooms, reveal all 5 pieces of Exodia, and instantly win. If he didn't, Kira would tell you all the cards in your hand, that you had set, and on top of your deck. Kira could do this because he had gotten his hands on a cheat engine that allowed him to mess with the game in loads of different ways. With the safety of the program compromised, a program that had you entering your IP address to play, all major tournaments and play ceased while Kaiba and the team looked for how to solve the problem. The cheat engine, though, was later shared by Kira with different members of the community, and from there, trust eroded and people began leaving the service for newly available options. Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Dueling was a piece of software that had existed since at least 2005, 2 years prior to KC, and had been receiving constant updates. The very early forms of what would become Percy and YGO Pro were just taking off, and in a year or two, Dueling Book would launch. Dueling Book isn't just a footnote in the story of KC, though, as if you go by the word of Kaiba himself, he'll tell you they had a hand to play in the service's downfall. With KC predating Dueling Book by 4 years with its launch in 2011, Dueling Book would have to find a way to convince people to use it over a service like KC. Kaiba alleges that the team behind Dueling Book were the ones behind the cheat engine that killed KC, and distributed it as a way to draw attention away from the game and onto their new simulator. These allegations are all made in old deleted forum posts, as going to the KC forums now reveals maybe 7 posts overall. These posts, though, you might realize, are all from at least the past year. I was just scanning it to get an idea of what it was like, and then I noticed they were talking about adding Genesis support, and wouldn't you guess it, Kaiba is working on a new version of the KC software. Well, at least somebody maintaining the old site and the new forum. I can't tell you if it's the same guy, or a guy simply going by the same username. The new system claims to be bringing Yu-Gi-Oh! Back to the way it was pre-Xyz monsters, as they compromised the game's integrity and removed skill, making a simulator for Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans who want to go back to the good old days. I wish the team nothing but the best in their pursuits of making a new simulator, but let's be reasonable here. If you want to play retro Yu-Gi-Oh!, you're at no loss for options, all the way up to the YCS level. Downloading a whole new app just to play like that is not going to go well. Secondly, this is a world where Master Duel exists. Downloading any third-party software is going to be a hard sell. Speaking of Konami, though, while all these wars were being fought on the unofficial simulator front, what was Konami themselves doing to fill the need? Well, Yu-Gi-Oh! Online. Yes, even before Virtual Desktop, or similar early simulators like Game King, the very first online way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Was an officially licensed Konami product, Yu-Gi-Oh! Online. Released in April of 2005, Yu-Gi-Oh! Online was an official simulator that let you connect across the world to duel whoever you wanted. As far as complexity goes, it was nothing but a simulator. No game to be played alongside it. You simply bought the game and dueled. However, something that you would learn very quickly was that the game itself might as well have been free. In fact, depending on if you got it in stores or online, it was free. Monetization is kind of online's lasting legacy because it's an insane system Konami worked out for how to make money off of it. Instead of a subscription service like the previous year's World of Warcraft or a flat purchase, Konami instead decided to lock out the game's only feature behind consistent, unique purchases. The currency of Yu-Gi-Oh! Online was duel points, with you needing to spend a duel point every time you wanted to play a game. Already this is kinda nuts, because it wouldn't be until the rise of mobile gaming in the late 2000s and early 2010s that we would get systems like this, that locked out your ability to play without a purchase. Duel Links has a system like this now, but that's alongside the fact that it's on a cooldown timer and only applies to PvE duels. PvP duels can be played as much as you want. Online won't let you do anything besides look at the cards without a purchase. This system would only ever be as acceptable as the duel passes were affordable. If they were cheap, it would be unacceptable. If they were expensive, somebody was going to die. Duel passes came in a few different forms, firstly being the duel pass cards. These came in foiling like a regular pack of trading cards and would get you about 3 duel passes equaling 30 duel points. I don't know what they expected from people, but $3 for, let's say, a week worth of games doesn't sound evil. Don't get it wrong, this is inherently evil, but it doesn't sound as bad as it could have been. The next tier above that was the Duel USB. This was a USB drive that you could buy for $10 that would get you 90 Duel Pass points as well as a few free cards. And after that, you threw it in the trash because it wasn't big enough to hold anything more than the information it came with. Put a JPEG on it, it'll explode. A step below that were the SMS Duel Passes that you could buy for £1, since it was an EU exclusive feature, which would net you 15 Duel Pass points. The final tier, though, was Duel Pass 150. It does what it says and provides you with 150 Duel Pass points. Which, if 90 of them were valued at $10, I guess this would put it around $15. Actually, this is the thing you're most likely to know about if you know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! Online, since the wiki says that Duel Pass 150 was temporarily banned in America due to fraud, and it wouldn't return until years down the line. I hate to ask, but where exactly does this information come from? I can find it only on one other place on the internet, and it's from a 2007 article on a Yu-Gi-Oh! Online website that doesn't cite a source either. What would have been the fraud in this case? The amount of Duel Pass points? The cards gotten from the purchase? A funny story, but I just don't think it exactly means anything. The original game would eventually be taken down in 2007 and replaced with Yu-Gi-Oh! Online Duel Evolution, a new version of the simulator that included avatar customization and NPCs to duel in case you didn't want to go online. It's also around here the economy for Yu-Gi-Oh! Online was established. See, you could always trade with other players for better cards, but it was hard for people to settle on a definitive standard for what was a good or bad trade. The 2008 Shonen Jump prize card, Doom Caliber Knight, though, was the solution. Doom Caliber Knight was both good and common enough to act as a gold standard for what cards were worth trading. If a card was good, like Test Tiger, you'd price it around 3 Doom Caliber Knights. So your trade partner would have to find something that was as good as 3 Doom Calibers. The final update for Yu-Gi-Oh! Online would come with Yu-Gi-Oh! Online Duel Accelerator, which brought in synchro monsters, as well as 3D avatars and rewards for dueling NPCs. The game would only last a few more years after that, with end of service beginning in 2010. The game seemed to improve a lot with time, but really, there was always going to be a barrier for entry with the Duel Pass system. It's not inherently never mind, it actually is inherently terrible, and the single purchase style makes it a lot less appealing than a set-it-and-forget-it subscription service. Even the cooldown and pay-to-speed-up system like from Duel Links would have been much more preferable to spending money every time you wanted duel points. I also can't help but wonder just how much these unofficial simulators cut into online's player base and influenced the decision to shut it down. Maybe the picture copyright for Dueling book in 2015 was some delayed retribution. Monster Capsule Breed and Battle. The very first Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game ever made. Breed and Battle is such an old game that it predates the card game we're all familiar with. This game has no cards in it to speak of, and is instead entirely based on the monster chess game from chapter 34 of the manga in the Death Tea arc. The game aired alongside the Season 0 anime by Toei, and as a result includes the anime's cast for the vocals in the game. The meat of the game, instead of cards, is a chess-style strategy game, with you taking a team of 6 monsters onto a board against the opponents in order to destroy their gold capsule and win the game. Those 6 monsters act as a combination of Pokemon and Digimon, with your 6 each possessing different abilities and types that change how they move and fight. Monsters come in a variety of different races and classes, including birds, animals, sea creatures, reptiles, plants, and more. They can also be either smart, strong, or cool. Different races also get different movement quirks, like sea creatures being able to move over water spaces, and birds only moving diagonally, but ignoring space gimmicks altogether. The Digimon portion comes from acquiring new monsters. Instead of capturing them, you have to collect eggs on the actual board to hatch and raise. These eggs always hatch into one of the 6 starting monsters, but depending on what buttons you press as the egg hatches, and what you do with the monster once it hatches, it can evolve into loads of different forms. You can give it dumbbells to exercise, a teddy bear to make it happy. Doing all of this will influence what the monster becomes, and can even influence it into a class change for a new type, like Agile, Zombie, or Dragon. Seems kinda redundant to take good care of a monster to turn it into a zombie, ignoring it's gonna have the same results. The monster pool is incredibly deep as well, with your choices extending to over 100 monsters, including familiar ones like Mystic Elf and Blue Eyes. Getting into the game itself, and various stronger monsters also come packing special abilities, like Blue Eyes getting to attack all monsters directly in front of it no matter the distance, or zombie types getting to resurrect fallen monsters. While the game does have a solo arcade mode with a boss fight against Yami Yugi at the end, the real appeal is the 2-player mode. By loading in 2 different memory cards, you can play against a friend and their team of monsters they've raised all on their own. The game is visually pretty, has a fun progression system, is fun to play. It's a shame the whole thing is in Japanese and therefore a lot harder to get through without a guide. Only thing harder is actually figuring out how to get each monster. If you thought Runerigus was unintuitive and have to keep checking guides to get Gundramon, then forget Monster Capsules, because there is no guide on how to get what you want. You simply have to hope some of the time and follow the bare-bones guides that exist on Japanese websites. If you can stomach trying to figure out how the game works, both its language and bizarre systems, it's well worth your time. Especially if you want a glimpse into what Yu-Gi-Oh! Could have been if it stuck with the school setting. Bang Zoom Zexal Dub. Ever since the series touched down in America, the dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been handled by 4Kids. From Duel Monsters all the way up to now, 4Kids, or 4K Media, the company it restructured into, has been responsible for the show. Through good and bad, they've led the franchise, but one time it seemed like it was all going to come to an end. This starts with the grim truth that 4Kids was in financial trouble towards the end of the 2000s. You can blame a lot of stuff on it, like the flagging popularity of their flagship shows, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And TMNT, The general drop in viewership for cartoon blocks and cartoons as a whole, with Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network similarly faltering, it's a compounding issue. Personally, I'd bet money on Chaotic having a huge part in it. Like we've talked about before, Chaotic was a purely 4Kids funded venture, meaning they'd eat all the profits and losses. And boy did Chaotic lose. The game's crash of over $7 million in 2008, and then $12 million in 2009, two of the worst years to be losing a lot of money, was enough to put anybody half in the grave, and 4Kids had to make up the weight somewhere else. This would lead to a lawsuit between 4Kids, Nihon Ad System, and TV Tokyo, stemming from 4Kids allegedly withholding funds from the two companies when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh! Royalties. Among the allegations were accusations of cutting deals with Cartoon Network and Funimation for Yu-Gi-Oh! Home video distribution rights, without paying royalties to Nihon Ad System or TV Tokyo. There were also allegations of using NAS and TV Tokyo's money to fund the cost of dubbing, and even cutting a deal to release Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes as a part of Game Boy Advanced Video without notifying NAS or TV Tokyo. The judge might have had to bring in a TV with a Super Game Boy Advanced attached to a GameCube into the courtroom, and then found out GBA Video doesn't work on it, so he would have to take out his own GBA to properly view the evidence. By the way, I didn't know this, but the only GBA Video Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes are the second half of the 4-part duel between Yugi and Joey in Battle City. Well, now if I want to follow the story on only my Game Boy, the whole thing doesn't make sense. The lawsuit was devastating for 4Kids and was ultimately the reason the company had to file for bankruptcy in March of 2011. With the newest season, Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, still in need of an English dub though, NAS and TV Tokyo would shop around to various dubbing companies to find one that would be willing to produce the show, eventually finding its company in Bang Zoom. Bang Zoom would produce 26 episodes of Zexal dubbed in-house with a completely different voice cast, as well as score, sound effect, even brand new animation, since, as a show of faith, NAS and TV Tokyo gave Bang Zoom access to the animation files themselves in order to make their job as easy as possible. This proves that 4Kids has been working with a handicap the entire time. The cast of the new dub included English voice acting icon Johnny Young Bosch of Trigun and Bleach fame, Vic Mignogna from Full Metal Alchemist and Dragon Ball, Richard Cancino, Liam O'Brien, even Sam Riegel returning after voicing Rex Raptor and Arcana in the original dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! However, the dub would end up never releasing because the court case between 4Kids, NAS, and TV Tokyo had a massive turnabout. Not only did NAS and TV Tokyo withdraw a lot of their claims of unreported income, including the highest value ones like the Funimation deal, making this agreement with Bang Zoom was found to be a breach of a court order saying that 4Kids still retained the rights as the trial was ongoing. The termination of their working agreement with 4Kids was found to be improperly handled by NAS and TV Tokyo, meaning that the termination was withdrawn and 4Kids retained exclusive rights to dubbing Yu-Gi-Oh! In America. So by shopping around to Bang Zoom, NAS and TV Tokyo were actually breaking the law. By March of 2012, the lawsuit had actually ended in 4Kids' favor to the tune of $8 million. After this, both to keep their connections and maybe keep a closer eye on the company, 4Kids was bought by Konami and turned into 4K Media, the company who handles Yu-Gi-Oh! Dubs to this day. That meant the 26 episodes produced by the Bang Zoom team are never to be released, having been made under dubious legal circumstances. Here's the actual court records detailing the ending of the trial. I haven't changed a single word in this entire thing. Like characters in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series itself, 4Kids and the Consortium were locked in a high-stakes duel over the future of the series in the Western world, and by extension, the survival of 4Kids as a going concern. On March 24, 2011, the Consortium attempted to end the duel by issuing a letter that purports to terminate its licensing agreement with 4Kids. Who the fuck was doing bits in the courtroom? Despite the dub's illegal limbo, we have gotten bits of it released over time from people who would have access, including voice director Kristen Reed and Johnny Young Bosch himself. Kristen's clip only exists as a fan cam recording of a panel done at Armageddon Expo in 2012, and Johnny's is a comparison between the first duel of the show with Shark and Yuma. Now, I know it's sacrilege to say this, but I don't necessarily think the Bang Zoom version is an improvement. Okay, so Shark's voice, first of all, doesn't fit at all. I think the 4Kids version is much better at capturing that tough delinquent type compared to the Bang Zoom version, which is much more snobby.
Big talk. Alright, Yuma, say that we did duel. You want Bronx deck back, but what's in it for me?
I'm gonna do you a favor. After I win and take that deck from you, I'm gonna smash that key to bits right before your eyes!
Maybe it's just me, doesn't sound like Shark at all. Yuma is weirder. His dub voice has never been one of my favorites, especially when you compare the deeper, more reserved voice in the clip to the end of the show, where he's gotten a lot more shrill. But Johnny doesn't quite fit Yuma either. He's too deep to voice Yuma, who's supposed to be an overactive and annoying kid. That's part of his character.
It's not where I'm going, it's where Utopia's going. Cause since I stopped his attack before, his strength is now doubled, and he gets to attack again.
That's enough from you! You don't know me at all, Shark! No matter how many times I fail, or get laughed at, I'm always able to pick myself up and try again! And that's because I never stop believing in myself!
Also, this isn't a problem with the performance, but f*** off saying Katobing instead of feeling the flow or something like that. Dante Bio, motherfucker. I'm sure it would have been fine over time, but I don't think it was the biggest improvement in the world. Personally, I think his current voice ever since Duel Links has been the best it's ever been. It finds a sweet spot between the two versions. Regardless of that, we can all agree that this would have been the worst Yu-Gi-Oh! Opening we've ever heard.
Never giving up, never giving in. I'm with my best friends, and we're here to win!
Fucking Chuck E. Cheese music. Yu-Gi-Oh! Alex. What does it say about Capsule Monsters that the most interesting thing about it was the part that doesn't exist? American-produced Yu-Gi-Oh! Products always find their way back to Japan eventually. For the cards, they'll show up in special packs dedicated to TCG imports. World Premiere Pack 2025, for instance, imported Mimighoul, Mitsurugi, and the Odeon deck from Maze of the Master. Mattel-produced Yu-Gi-Oh! Toys will find their way to Japan, in limited quantities, but it can be confirmed they were, thanks to Kazuki Takahashi's house tour, which displayed them alongside the rest of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Merch ever made. Animation will also find its way over, and while the pool of American-produced Yu-Gi-Oh! Animation is small, it does still make it there. Pyramid of Light was created for the American audience, but did eventually come over in the form of a TV movie. The exception to this, though, is the Capsule Monsters miniseries. It's a fully animated season of Yu-Gi-Oh! That could easily be imported over with a new dub and slapped on TV, but they chose not to do that. This was a show animated by Gallup, approved by NAS and TV Tokyo, who own the rights to the show. They have the ability to release a dub, but chose not to. I say chose because there is evidence that Japan was actually supposed to get the show, but they ended up not releasing it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Alex is the name of the Japanese dub of Capsule Monsters that never got released, originating from a years-old site hosted by Gallup that confirmed the name alongside other projects they had put out at the time. While it only lists the series as being released in America, with no mention of a Japanese release, if it was only ever meant for an American release, why would it have a unique Japanese name instead of just going by Capsule Monsters? No promotional material of this version of Capsule Monsters exists. Not a logo, or a commercial, or a print ad, nothing. It's essentially vaporware, if not for the scant sightings we've had that confirm at some point it was a thing that was meant to come out. Even staff who worked on the show, like director Katsumi Ono, have posted on social media asking when the show was going to get localized. The reason for the dub's non-existence is a mystery, but there is at least some compelling speculation from people with knowledge about how these things work. John Opliger is an anime historian who's been interested in the medium for over 20 years, and runs the site Anime Nation, where he has a Q&A section where he answers questions from curious anime fans. One fan brought up the disappearance of Yu-Gi-Oh! Alex, and John was able to shed some light on it from his understanding of the companies. NAS and TV Tokyo are very protective of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Brand, and a show like Capsule Monsters doesn't line up with their vision of the franchise. That's why it's fine for release in America, which has a different vision of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but in Japan, that vision doesn't line up. It supports a product you can't buy in the region and was made exclusively by a foreign company, in this case Mattel. It features a plot they were much less hands-on with, since 4Kids had a much more solid vision of what they wanted. With Pyramid of Light, they were able to do what they wanted, but with Capsule Monsters, they weren't. It features ideas that aren't present in the ongoing series, and could dilute the image of Yu-Gi-Oh! That NAS and TV Tokyo want to present. With no secondary product to advertise like every other Yu-Gi-Oh! Product has, what's the point of dubbing a decade-old show that nobody really remembers? I don't know all of John's sources or how reliable he is on the subject exactly, but I do think he makes a compelling argument. I think that Alex was likely just the internal name at Gallup they used while making the show, rather than a cancelled series that was meant to come out. Not the most exciting ending, but it's an ending! Not everybody gets those. Expensive Exodia Tazo. Hey, who's excited to hear me get something wrong because 100% of the information I had to look up for this section was in Spanish and I can't read Spanish? Mexico, you had it too good for too long. So, Pogs, the informal name of poggers. Originating in Hawaii in the 90s, Pogs were the flat discs included in the caps of milk containers, with the name Pog originating from the specific drinks the caps came from, being passion fruit, orange, and guava. POG is an acronym. You don't even have to like Yu-Gi-Oh! To exhale slightly through your nose and say, that's kind of interesting. Like everything in Hawaii, the mainland came to f*** it up, and POGs were introduced to the world in 1993. A lot of companies would get in on the craze because it was the easiest win any of them had ever seen. All you had to do was take a picture of your thing and print it on a small cardboard disc that prior to this was as worthless as a thing could be. Kids would love them since they could get a whole bunch of them at once, collect ones of a certain brand, trade them with their friends, and best of all, beat them out of their friends by playing the actual game of Pogs, which involved stacking up a tower, slamming down a hard plastic Pog, and then grabbing the ones that landed face up. The ease of production and ravenous demand for tiny cardboard discs led every company with time to spare to release their own Pogs. Some companies, though, wanted to insulate themselves from the highly volatile cardboard industry and decided to handle production of their own Pog alternatives. One of those companies was Frito-Lay's, who would launch their Pog competitor Tazos in 1994. Tazos were functionally the exact same thing as a Pog, but with some differences, including some being made of plastic and being available in bags of Frito-Lay products. In Australia, you'd open up a bag of Twisties. The Greek would open up Cheetos, and in Mexico, you'd open Sabritas. Just like with Pogs, various brands would team up with Frito-Lay's to release themed Tazos around new cartoons and sporting events, with anime making up a huge part of the lineup. Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, Naruto. Back when being an anime fan was a point of shame, you might accidentally get outed by your bag of chips. Naturally, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be a part of the Tazo line, and with it came a peculiar scarcity problem that rocks the collecting world even to this day. The Mexican Tazos for Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a rarity system to them. with a few different Tazos like Harpy Lady Sisters, Vorse Raider, and Rocket Warrior being holographic. You were encouraged to collect them all, but there was one Tazo printed in such small numbers that finishing a collection was impossible. That was the final Exodia Tazo, part of a line of special Tazos that it either occupies alone or are so rare that the Exodias we have are the only example of the line. What makes them even more valuable is that they're made of an aluminum body, which means that they're much harder to keep in good condition, causing mint Exodia Tazos to become the rarest Tazos in the line and one of the most expensive Pog-like objects of all time. How expensive? How about $4,000? Important to note that not all Exodia Tazos are this Exodia Tazo. This here is an Exodia Tazo, but it doesn't have the Sabrita smiley face. This is an Australian Tazo, not fit to wipe your ass with. This is a Sabrita Exodia Tazo, but it's not this Sabrita Exodia Tazo. Only this Exodia, in this pose, made of metal, is the valuable one. And this version of this Exodia Tazo isn't even the most expensive version of this Exodia Tazo. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Promotion had been such a big success in Mexico that Frito-Lay's actually sent factory workers Exodia Tazos sealed with a Sabrita logo on the front, along with a collection of other rare Tazos, like the Mr. Burns Tazo from the Simpsons line. Nobody has ever been able to get more than a few pictures of this Exodia Tazo, and the ones that have taken pictures seem to take pictures of ransacked ones, as they're missing loads of the Tazos they came with. Even just the loose Exodia Tazo runs up against the most expensive Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards ever sold, which means this even rarer variant could probably fetch close to Mattel Cyber Dragon numbers. If anybody finds one, just make sure to send it to me for inspection first. I gotta make sure now, cause for some reason I'm an expert on Mexican chip bag toys. Duelo De Huevos. Parodies are a topic we covered almost a year ago at this point. And it doesn't seem like there's very much left to say. Sure, there were some examples I didn't cover, but where's the harm in leaving some investigating for you guys to do? Well, there is one very big example from Mexico that I missed, in the form of eggs. Okay, hold on, this is gonna take a minute. Huevo Cartoons is a Mexican cartoon studio established back in 2001 that specialized in internet animation. Before releasing any TV shows or movies, it was a site you could go to watch cartoons of eggs being a little naughty. One of the creators of the studio, Gabriel Riva Palicio Alatrista, even said it was Mexico's answer to South Park. No more evident than with the character Osama Bin Egg. You know Osama Bin Laden? No, the other one. While the company would certainly keep up its adult animation going forward, the Huevo Cartoons team would also start appealing to kids with things like Huevos Kids, Fabrica de Huevos, and the Huevos film series, starting with Una Película de Huevos in 2006. I don't know how much more toned down the films were from the original online cartoons, but I'm guessing it's probably more Simpsons edgy than South Park edgy. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. I'll be happy to be corrected on this one. I skimmed the first movie. Didn't seem like the eggs were showing off their assholes. Probably fine. The first movie was even popular enough to earn the Mexican equivalent of an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, and was the 16th highest grossing Mexican film ever made. But what does any of this got to do with Yu-Gi-Oh, you might ask? Well, just like with everywhere else in the world, Yu-Gi-Oh had a lot of popularity in Mexico, and being such a fixture of pop culture at the time drew the attention of Huevo Cartoons, and led to them releasing a series of collectible cards and stickers in the style of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. These were simple parodies in the style of most of their other products, including characters like Huevo Esponje, Huevo Neutron, Huevo Ball Z. These aren't even jokes, they just put the word egg in the title. Where the hell was Egg, Egg, and Eggy? Do we even care? Anyway, the team at Huevo Cartoons saw more potential in the concept than as a mere sticker line, and contracted game designer Antonio Ulafareza to turn the sticker line into Duelo De Huevos. Duelo De Huevos was an original card game in the way I'm a bike. It isn't. The rules of the game are almost an exact mirror of Yu-Gi-Oh's rules, with life points, different monster levels, attack and defense, effects, but did have a few interesting mechanical changes. 6 monster zones predates the extra monster zone by a decade, 3 zones for spells and 3 zones for traps is an odd change, and the enchantment zones took a new spin on field spells, by having a zone for enchantments that worked on both fields, and one for enchantments that only affected you. Even if it was a simple knockoff in terms of rules, they clearly tried to make the cops look twice when they would get pulled over. Copying Yu-Gi-Oh! Though did also mean they adopted some of Yu-Gi-Oh's most confusing features, like chains and the entire battle phase. The cards started out with a lot of the characters from the Huevos cartoon catalog, including Osama bin Laden, but as the line continued, it would lean more into original characters, or at least less celebrity with egg in their name puns. The line would last for 5 expansions up to Duelo De Huevos Crystal, when the game got cancelled due to excessive piracy, which made it impossible for the company to turn a profit. If they had just held on for a few more years, we could have gotten Egg Z's monsters. Awkward Latin American GX Dub. I didn't mean for 3 Spanish ones back to back. I feel like I haven't given the proper dues to the foreign language dubs of Yu-Gi-Oh! Funny, considering the one I know is technically a foreign language dub. The voices that are iconic to me and so many other dub watchers sound totally different depending on the various regions they're dubbed into. From the Iberian dub, the German dub, the French dub, the Arabic dub, the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the influence it's had on so many is so much more broad than just the Japanese and English versions. This extends doubly to dubs like the French one that were able to get back their original cast to dub Dark Side of Dimensions. It was such an amazing experience for me with the English dub that I hope plenty of other regions got to enjoy the same thing. These different dubs can include various facts and controversies all their own, like the Colombian dub suddenly canceling itself in the middle of a 3-part duel in 5Ds, or the Serbian dub leaving in bloopers in the finished product. Sticking to Mexico for the Latin American dub, and we have one of the most awkward and unfortunate casting choices I've ever heard of. The problem begins in episode 53 of the Latin American GX Dub, when Jaden's current voice actor, Isabella Martinon, is replaced by Miguel Angel Leal, a super prominent Spanish voice actor known for voicing Ash in Pokemon from Diamond and Pearl onwards, Ken Kaneki in Tokyo Ghoul, and Meliodas in The 7 Deadly Sins. This alone isn't a problem, and his appearance on the show even opened doors for his family members to get roles, including brother Alfredo and sister Lupita. Alfredo and Lupita wouldn't have quite as high-profile a career as Miguel, but they still have notable roles, like Alfredo playing Todo Matsuda in Death Note, and Billy in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Lupita as well is known for her roles in ReZero, Full Metal Alchemist, and as Carly in iCarly. I suppose Mexico does need to laugh too. So, who would Alfredo and Lupita voice in GX? Well, it wouldn't be this low if it wasn't really bad, so stand back as I reveal they voiced Jesse and Yubel. Oh, fuck no. If you're unfamiliar with GX, let me explain why this is really creepy. Jaden and Jesse have a very different relationship compared to the rest of Jaden's relationships in GX. Their shared ability to see dual spirits sets them apart from the rest of the characters, and gives them a bond Jaden barely has with anyone else. His relationship with Cyrus, for instance, is treated as a big brother-little brother dynamic at first, until Jaden asserts they're on the same level. Jaden and Chaz are more like bickering brothers, with Chaz constantly trying to one-up Jaden, and Jaden egging him on. Jaden and Alexis barely have a relationship. Jaden and Jesse, though, are able to prop each other up in a way nobody else can. This means Jesse is actually a competent duelist who doesn't need Jaden to come by and fix everything for him. Instances like the duel with Viper and Yubel when they're using the Sacred Beasts showcases Jesse as somebody Jaden can depend on. Somebody who renews Jaden's flagging efforts just with his confidence. It's not a stretch to view this as a romantic relationship. It's very Sam and Frodo like that. And before anybody says, oh, you're looking too deep into it, it's not really there, Rainbow Dragon, Neos. Rainbow Neos! Come on, this is classic gay Yu-Gi-Oh! Losing Jesse is what pushes Jaden over the top to become the Supreme King. And after he returns to normal, his first goal is getting Jesse back. That's where Yubel comes in. Whatever romantic undertones are there with Jesse become overtones with Yubel. Yubel will directly tell Jaden that they love him and want to protect him forever. That's the reason the latest Yubel evolution is called the Loving Defender Forever, and even mimics the pose of Jaden's favorite card, Flame Wingman. That's what makes the duel where Yubel possesses Jesse's body all the more impactful. So you have this extremely passionate love triangle, and they're all being voiced by siblings. I can't speak to if the subtext of the dialogue gets changed massively in the Latin American dub of GX, but if it's anything like it is in the Japanese version, or even the American dub to an extent, then this makes for some extremely awkward moments when you remember that the voices are all related to each other. And this should have been where it ended, but god damn it, when I was doing research on Lupita Leal, I found out she voiced Elizabeth in Seven Deadly Sins. That's Meliodas' wife, the guy voiced by her brother. Again! The one that gave us that f***ass panel of Meliodas holding a baby and saying, "Hands off my woman!" What is it about the Seven Deadly Allegations that just leaks on to all facets and makes it weird? Why are you weird? Kazuki Takahashi political art. Like most every mangaka, Kazuki Takahashi's personal life was very low-key and under wraps. Given I've had to make do with the same 2 or 3 interviews and house tours to use as B-roll whenever he comes up, it's clear the guy didn't want his life broadcast too heavily. We would eventually get more of a look into his personal life when he became more active on social media, namely Instagram. We could see how he reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic, April Fool's sketches for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Babies spin-off, the game ideas we covered before, all pretty benign stuff. One post in particular, though, comes off as far more caustic than the rest, and it was a post made in July of 2019. During that time, Japan was having a massive election for their House of Councilors, with 124 seats up for grab between the 6 major political parties. That's more than half of the available seats, and any party that could get 123 seats would have a majority on the House of Councilors. The only party you need to know about for this is the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP. The LDP in Japan is kind of a complicated system to understand from a political sense. There isn't really an LDP group, but rather multiple splintered LDP factions who don't actually agree on much. Using a political strategy called the 1955 system, these different factions are free to fight amongst each other by staying under the same banner to ensure the vote doesn't get split. All of these different factions, using the same name, are able to retain control over Japan's House of Representatives, which gives them control over almost the entire government. This is where Takahashi comes in, because Takahashi was super against the 1955 system and LDP. In particular, its current figurehead, Shinzo Abe. With the 2019 election looming on high, Takahashi took to his Instagram to share an edited piece of artwork from the Monster Art book released for the 20th anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh! In it, Atem's Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl cards are replaced with slips of paper saying, "Let's vote," and the aforementioned monsters have text bubbles above them, with Dark Magician saying, "Really, Japan has become a difficult place to live in," and Girl saying, "A fascist regime equals a dark future." The actual body of the post is mostly advertising the art book and apologizing to delivery drivers who would have to carry it for how thick it was. The back half, though, is Takahashi lamenting the current state of Japan, calling the current administration traitorous, and wondering if Japan's future will be safe. It's a super uncharacteristic post for what Takahashi was posting previous, and showcases a look into his personal thought process we never saw before. Based on how he speaks about it, it's clearly a passionate topic for Takahashi. For him to make such a statement that was this blunt after never having made a political statement before in his career. Of course, there's a reason mangaka don't usually make statements like this. It was met with immediate backlash for him speaking so bluntly, and he was forced to issue an apology. That apology, though, has since been totally lost ever since it was deleted off of his Instagram. So it was more likely a "sorry you got offended" apology than actually feeling bad about what he said. Porn AI. Yippee! So AI has been a hot topic in f***ing everything recently because f***ing everything has had AI shoved into it with no regard for if it's a good idea or not. On YouTube alone, you can AI generate a thumbnail for your AI generated video whose creative content cannot exceed Doug Walker levels of What If Mario Met Batman. Your coffee machine can use AI to determine how hot to make the coffee. And this is all leading us to an IT guy mentality where if our appliances make noises we don't recognize, we shoot them. AI has some applications somewhere, like telling a surgeon which organs to not cut out, but in entertainment especially, it's a buzzword, attached to something that looks like shit and has no thought or personal meaning behind it, because it leached off of somebody else's thought and personal meaning. But corporations still put it into everything now because it's a buzzword to make people think the fridge is smarter. Why does the fridge need to be smarter? Anyway, as it's a dumb company, Konami tried getting in on the AI trend, but did it so poorly it nearly got them into legal trouble. It all started at the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2025 back in August, when Konami revealed a brand new feature coming to Master Duel, an AI announcer that would commentate over your match in languages including English and the rest. This was met with immediate love from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, who expressed their love through loud hatred. This was a feature nobody asked for at a time where demand for new stuff in Master Duel was at an all-time high. A second ladder for alt formats, more ways to play the game. We instead got an AI saying,
"The summon of Erebus, the underworld monarch, is really going to dominate this duel. I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now.
What's more insulting is their world championship would have an AI announcer tested out at it. The same event with their actual announcers still on the call. The AI is god-awful. Instead of insightful commentary that an actual player of the game could give, the AI instead makes inane, often wrong calls. It changes pronunciation from Ryziel to Ryzel to Ryal. If a new player is listening, how are they supposed to tell what these cards are called?
The player on the far side special summons Sword Ryziel. Activate effect. You can add one fire pyro-type light monster from your deck to your hand. After resolving Sword Ryziel's effect, the player seems to be contemplating their next move. There's a 79.2% chance they'll summon Ice Ryziel to the field. The Ryziel series is a theme built around thunder and pyro monsters.
A player listening is also unlikely to get a good grasp of what a deck is doing because the AI keeps cutting itself off, unable to finish a thought while formulating a new one. You haven't lived until you've heard an AI try to pronounce Memento Mictlan Takutakla.
There's a 15.8% chance. Fusion with 3 monsters. Fusion summon Memento Mictlan Takutlika. Creation King.
It was clear the work that Konami had done on the software wasn't near enough for an official release. and the date for when, or even if this was going to become a permanent part of Master Duel, was never announced. Only a few days after this event, though, on September 10th, 2 of the videos containing the AI were taken down, and Konami issued a statement explaining why. It turns out that the Japanese version of the AI specifically had been trained off of the voice of actor Hibiko Yamamura without her knowledge, and was trained off of various roles she had done over her career. What I mean by that, though, is that it was based on one performance in particular, which was from Suki ni Yoriso Otome no Sahao 2, specifically her role as S. the Gaelic Arnots, where she was credited as Nonoyami Benny. To give you the same first impression I got of the game, let me read you the very first Reddit thread that shows up when I searched it. This was search result number 3 in Google. Suryotsu 2 made me decide that I don't like incest now. I think all that matters is that he got there eventually. So, it's a porn game. The company who made the AI, not Konami, but a third party called Anelli, trained their AI off of Yamamura's performance in the game and then sold it to Konami for them to use, all without ever informing or contacting Yamamura. Following the discovery, Anelli's website listed that it was going to close until it could solve the problem. And as of November, it hasn't reopened. Personally, and I know you don't want to hear it, I know you're gonna get mad at me for saying it, but it's my right to say it, I think this was the wrong call. You bought a plagiarism machine and then got mad at it for plagiarizing. Would you get mad at Leonardo da Vinci for painting the Mona Lisa? Or at Ryan Dunn for shoving a toy car up his ass? Then I think you should let the AI scrape the porn games to call Memento matches wrong! Obviously, this is a huge and embarrassing oversight, but I feel like the title of this section buries the lead a little bit. The embarrassing part isn't that it was a porn game, the embarrassing part is that Konami, a multi-million-dollar company, is fucking bumming it from porn games to voice their Yu-Gi-Oh! Matches. Hibiko Yamamura has every right to feel as frustrated as she is because her work, whether it really matters that it was from a porn game or not, was stolen from her, and her voice, the thing she uses to make a living, is being used without her consent in a way she didn't agree to. If somebody stole all your building materials and built a house without your permission, you'd be pissed! If your main takeaway from this is that porn games exist, I'm sorry, but school's in the morning, you need to go to bed. These AI voice models exist solely off the idea that they exist in a legal gray zone where they can continue to exist so long as the people they're stealing from don't kick up a fuss. When they do, like in the case with Yamamura against Konami, they really have no option but to back down, because if they don't, they risk popping the whole bubble and having serious regulations put on their theft machine. Kaiba's 4chan Vtuber. Dude, I am just putting words together at random now. What the hell does that mean? Konami has done a very good job thus far, making sure the player base can't ruin any of its ongoing events. Normally they leave that up to themselves by playing hentai at their world championship, or hosting a normal Shadow Duelist tournament. There was one, now long forgotten event though, that did feel the full force of the internet's wrath, before doing the impossible and turning it around into a win. The event itself was a Duel Links event, which will have its own unique events from time to time that turn the game into a board game, but this was a different type of game altogether. The event Konami had planned was closer to the Shadow Duelist tournament, with various players playing in preliminaries, this time against popular figures in the card game and anime space, before taking on a final boss duelist. The twist this time was that instead of inventing a new character to host the tournament would be hosted by none other than Seto Kaiba himself, represented here by a VTuber-style PNG of his default render from the game. This would be accompanied by actual, live running commentary from Kaiba's official English voice actor Eric Stewart. This was the Virtual Kaiba Challenge. They've never done this before, or since, and it's such an interesting idea. I want to say cool, but interesting is a much more apt phrase, because it's interesting how Konami let an event like this go forward when there was so much that could have potentially gone wrong. You have 3 creators, Slushy, Kriparian, and ProZD, dueling random Twitch chatters for days as Kaiba is on the sideline doing running commentary and throwing out insults. This was an event that required consistent, in-character improv from Eric Stewart, the guests to have enough knowledge of the game to put up a decent challenge, and hope the average Twitch chatter wouldn't try to find a way to mess with the tournament. There were some issues early on, namely Eric's mic being buried in concrete, but Slushy's portion of the stream went off relatively well. Kriparian's section was less well put together, since despite being a world-renowned Hearthstone player, you can't get a truck driver and put him behind the wheel of a Formula 1 race car. His skills didn't transfer gracefully, and he ended up going 1-7 in the whole event. ProZD, meanwhile, got the brunt of the abuse, since he was at the center of a conspiracy started on 4chan. Users on the VG board were watching the tournament closely since it had the chance for audience participation, which meant the audience could ruin it. After dozens of attempts, one of the members was able to enter a room and was paired up against ProZD. Okay, now what? It's gotta be something heinous, so what's the worst thing we could do in the entire game? Make him play against weather painters. Of all the competitively viable decks available at the time in Duel Links, Weather Painter was the best option to make the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Look like dog shit. First off, it's a slow control deck. Weather Painters aren't known for explosive turns with massive damage numbers, and instead are all about slowly breaking the opponent down with a combination of strong effects and useful spells and traps. Weather Painter's whole gimmick is actually their spell and trap lineup, as monsters in the same column as the spell or trap played will gain a new effect. The fact that this is an inherited effect of the spell or trap means it won't show up in the effect text of the monster, but will show up when the effect is activated, meaning that it will look like the player using Weather Painters is activating effects not on the card. It makes sense when it's explained out like that, but nobody would be there to explain how the cards worked to ProZD when he was playing. Secondly was the calling card. How are we gonna let people know that 4chan was behind this? Well, that's where Sneed posting comes in. Sneed posting references a season 11 episode of The Simpsons called EI Annoyed Grunt, where Homer visits a store called Sneed's Feed and Seed, formerly Chuck's. The joke with the sign is that if it's called Sneed's Feed and Seed now, when it was owned by Chuck, it would have been Chuck's... Well, I think you get it. Actually, I don't. You're really dumb. It would have been called Chuck's Fucking Suck. The joke became massive on 4chan, with it eventually evolving into Sneed posting. Posting about the Sneed scene whenever possible, and especially when it was wildly inappropriate. So they had the operation all planned out. Operative Sneed was armed with cards very few had ever read, and they sent him out into the field to make a name for himself and ruin the event. The game Sneed played against ProZD was biblically boring. It's a game of slow playing, purposefully missing lethal, and dragging out the game to confuse and frustrate the organizers as much as possible, all with the hope that Kaiba might actually say Sneed. While he wouldn't during the course of the game, they did get a second chance as Sneed somehow made it to day 2 and would be taking on Kaiba himself. The game goes about as well as you could expect, with Sneed dominating, until the very end when Kaiba admits defeat.
That was an excellent.
Yeah. I guess I'm gonna have to concede that match, but it doesn't mean you're any good.
They did it. Kaiba had actually been wizened up to the joke.
If you need to take a second to appreciate that move, go ahead and take one.
What? No, this can't be happening.
You'll need it.
Oh my god! Kaiba at the very end started comboing Sneed puns, and it turned what could have been an embarrassing moment for Konami into an incredible moment for the community. They realized 4chan was trolling them, and decided to play along. For a split second at the start of Game 3, they even changed the Game 3 text at the top to Feed and Seed, just to make sure the message was clearly sent. When you hear 4chan has gotten involved in a contest or with some sort of fan event, you assume somebody's going to Alaska. But this might be one of the very few times both sides actually came out perfectly fine. Jeff Jones on Nicktoons. How did you watch Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid? For a lot of people, the answer is on Kids WB or during the 4Kids programming block next to shows like TMNT and Sonic X on Fox. Along with showings on channels like Cartoon Network as time went on, this is where a majority of people got their Yu-Gi-Oh! Fix. 4Kids' high status, thanks to their dubbing of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, meant they could afford to air on high-profile networks like these, getting their product out to as many people as possible. As their power decreased and the 2000s went on, they would be pushed around a bit, downgraded to the Toonsai block, and pushed to the CBS affiliate channel CW. Eventually, when that block ended, the rights to air Yu-Gi-Oh! In America would float around to various channels before largely ending up on Nickelodeon. The reason for this program shifting was thanks to that bankruptcy we talked about before, as now 4Kids didn't have the capital to afford to air on channels like Fox, and had to shop the show around to make up the difference. Zexal would start airing on the secondary channel Nicktoon in 2013 and would stay there through Arc 5. Vrains would start airing on the streaming platform Pluto TV, and Sevens onward would be on Disney XD. Back when the show was airing on Nicktoons, though, they would actually try to put some stake behind it and produce a few bumpers to hype up the series. In order to do that, they would recruit pro duelists to film bumpers for Arc 5 explaining how the new pendulum summoning mechanic worked. These included players Robert Boyajian, Jarrell Winston, and Jeff Jones talking about how pendulum summoning worked, what it could be used for, and advanced techniques like Xyz pendulum summoning, which was an Xyz summon following a pendulum summon. There isn't a whole lot to these, but I think it's remarkable the amount of effort put into a promo for a show at arguably the trough of its cultural relevance, on a channel that now exclusively shows SpongeBob reruns to get real pro players to educate kids on how the game worked. The Zexal Shout Cards. I'm surprised it's taken this long to talk about prize cards. We sorta talked about it back when discussing Yu-Gi-Oh's prizing problem, but it's a more interesting topic than in just that context. Seeing as Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't do cash prizing and only gives out consoles and cards to winners, why not make those cards special? Yu-Gi-Oh's always had to be real careful though with how these cards are handled, because in the early days, these prize cards were mechanically unique meta cards. Before their reprinting, cards like Crush Card Virus and Cyberstein, two of the strongest cards from their era, were prize cards. This made for a really odd power system, where the best cards were in the hands of players who just proved they didn't need them. They were the best of the best, and now just got a lot stronger with cards nobody else had access to. This would continue with later prize cards like Dark End Dragon and number 106 Giant Hand, which were extremely strong and only made widely available after they had already sorta lived out their lifespan. The solution to this was to stop printing mechanically unique cards that were intended for play and position the prize cards as more luxury items and trophies that didn't serve a purpose in the game. This gave rise to the Match Winner series of cards. These are monsters of various types that all share an effect of needing to be tribute summoned with 3 tributes of the same type, and upon direct attack wouldn't just win the game, but the entire match. If you pull off a match win effect in the first duel of a best of 3, you instantly win the best of 3. There have been 39 different match winners printed over the years, with a trend emerging later on in their lifespan. When handed out at a world championship, the match winner would actually be themed around the event they were won at. In 2013, the world championship was held in Las Vegas, Nevada. So the match winner cards, Grandopolis the Eternal Golden City, and Entertainment Hero Pit Boss were themed after Las Vegas, with Grandopolis being the city itself, and Pit Boss being a dealer in a casino. In 2014 in Italy, the prize cards were Leonardo's Silver Skyship and the Twin Kings, founders of the Empire, based on Leonardo da Vinci and the founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus. Remus had a good idea for a city name. Romulus had a better one. These all share another common trait, a little bit of text at the bottom of the card outside the effect text, specifying they're illegal for use in an official duel. This is text it shares with the Colored Border God cards, the Duelist Kingdom cards, Everybody's Hero, the Caricature cards, and, weirdly, Card of Last Will, a kind of strong trap card from a legendary collection that they decided was so strong it should be illegal. There's one more series of illegal cards that also counts as prize cards, and are the most badass fucking Yu-Gi-Oh cards ever printed. The Shout series. Setup for this one, Yuma is a cheater. Like, I know everybody in Yu-Gi-Oh is cheating all the time, but Yuma kinda puts his own spin on it. Yuma's shining draw is the ability to take a card he just drew, and turn it into the card he actually needs. A lot of people who only kinda sorta read a plot summary of Zexal on Reddit hold this against him as a reason Zexal sucks. But then Yugi attacks the moon, and it's not really that big of a deal. The Shout cards are a series of prize cards handed out in advanced tournament packs in Japan in 2014. Creator of Hope, Winning Formula, and Creator of Miracles. Each one of these cards references a moment in Zexal where Yuma bent the rules, with the main draw of the cards being their activation condition. They're the only cards in the game whose activation is dependent on what you say. Not like declaring a card name for Crossout Designator. I mean, to activate Creator of Hope, you have to shout, "I'm feeling the flow!" Then you're allowed to stack your deck. Winning Formula lets you special a number from your extra deck by saying, "The winning formula is complete!" And Creator of Miracles lets you special out a Chaos Utopia by shouting, "Zexal Field!" These were never intended for serious play, but if you have a problem with saying stupid stuff when playing your cards, you're about to get eaten alive in Yummy format. If you don't say, "I summon Cupsy Yummy," and wink where the star is in the name, you're getting banned and beaten by the cops. Darkness predicts future Yu-Gi-Oh! Seasons. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was so good at predicting Nazca lines, why not predict itself? As the villain of the undubbed Season 4 of GX, I doubt many people are actually aware of Darkness. For a crash course, close your eyes. There he is. Darkness is GX's final antagonist, a Bakura analog that's been present the whole time in the form of Atticus Rhodes and his Night Shroud persona, finally making his proper horny appearance during the show's endgame. While he certainly follows a lot of the final boss tropes, like a busted-ass deck, formal way of speaking, and minimal screen time, I do really like how Darkness parallels Jaden and the story of GX as a whole. In a story all about finding passions and building bonds, Darkness is the invert, finding strength in cold, calculated misery. With his explanation that he's doing all of this out of a logical understanding of the world, it means he is a being totally without passion. He's not doing this because he wants to, he's doing it because it's the way things should be. His duel with Jaden has plenty of memorable moments, like the merging of Yubel and Neos into Neos Wiseman, and the birth of God Neos. What we're talking about, though, is during the duel, when Darkness tries to convince Jaden that Earth is beyond saving. He starts his story with a card creating the universe, before pointing out the abnormal weather, unnatural occurrences, unstoppable disputes, and terrorism. The theory goes that each of these predictions from Darkness aren't random, but actually predict the next couple of series of the show by referencing key events. In order, the first thing to happen is in 5Ds. Darkness's prediction of unnatural occurrences could apply to a lot of things, from the Mechlord genocide to the Energy Reactor meltdown. With 5Ds' hyper-mechanization compared to past series, there's very little left natural in the world, which would make all of these mechanical meltdowns artificial or unnatural. Zexal's example keys on so perfectly, it makes the whole theory more plausible by its inclusion. The first thing Darkness refers to is a card creating the universe. In the beginning, there was a single card who ignited all life in the universe. This is, word for word, the Numeron code from Zexal, a card that created the universe and contains all knowledge that is and ever will be. With every other one, you have to do a bit of tweaking to the wording and a bit of creative reading, but not with this one. This one's dead on. Arc 5 is one of the looser ones, but Darkness mentions terrorism, and if there's a better way to describe what the Leo Institute does to the Xyz dimension, I can't think of it. When Darkness refers to ceaseless conflict, this could apply to Zexal as well, but since the universe-creating card keys on so exactly, I'm shifting this one over to Vrains. If you remember back to the entry about Vrains' original ending, I talked about how I looked into thousands of simulations about how humans and AI could coexist, and found it to be impossible. Sentient computer programming cannot live alongside humans, and one of them has to go. In that original ending, it would have concluded with that ceaseless conflict being seen through to the end, with only I and Yusaku left. And abnormal weather refers to that one time in Sevens when it rains but the schedule said it wouldn't. There was always going to be one that didn't fit. Genocide is present in every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Still think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a kid's show? Well, yeah. Just one with genocide. Like Avatar. And SpongeBob. Filthy f***ing nematodes. Dark subject matters are not foreign to Yu-Gi-Oh! Every series, regardless of the general vibe, will deal with heavier topics, and I'd say they do a good job with most of them. One theme that pops up in every series, though, is the topic of genocide. In every series, some group is being systematically wiped out, and it's up to the main cast to either stop it, look on helplessly, or in some cases, participate. Duel Monsters starts the trend with the Kul Elna massacre. Kul Elna was a town of criminals and thieves that existed back in ancient Egyptian times, and was the town unlucky enough to be selected by Akhenaten to be wiped out. With mounting threats from outside nations, he enacted a plan to create the Millennium Items, which would require the souls of 99 people to construct. Akhenaten had the village slaughtered, and had their body parts thrown in with the gold used to create the items, which imbued them with the power they have now. Not only does this lead to Thief King Bakura's eventual attack against the Pharaoh, and set the entire series into motion, it even has effects that last into GX's manga. In the GX manga, the final villain Tragodia is another massacre survivor, like Bakura, that similarly had so much hatred and pain that it manifested into Tragodia. Speaking of GX, not only does Darkness's plan for total global destruction involve the death of everybody on the planet, but one arc previous had superpolymerization. Superpolymerization was a lot like the Millennium Items, where it was all-powerful, but required a huge amount of souls in order to complete. When Jaden becomes the Supreme King and takes the nearly completed Super Poly, he decides to make up the weight of missing souls by slaughtering the Duel Academy students who had been transported to the Spirit World with his Coliseum of Death. 5Ds was kind enough to label its genocide as such with the Mechlord Genocide. The energy resource Energy, invented by Yusei's father, had been corrupted by overuse and malicious intent, causing it to spiral out of control. As a result, the Energy was able to manifest the Mechlords, an army of robots with the ability to capture and control the synchro monsters that were used to abuse Energy. Mechlords rampaged across the planet and killed a large amount of the population. until a man who embodied Yusei's core values, to the point of changing his face to look like Yusei, discovered that purging yourself of evil intent was enough to pacify the mech lords. Of course, it was all too late, and the energy ignited and blew up itself, the mech lords, and all but 4 remaining cyborg survivors. Zexal's is the entire plot of the show, as the conflict between Barian World and Astral World won't end until the other is gone. Neither side can coexist while the other is around, and they've been waging war for centuries to try to permanently put the other side down. Arc 5's Genocide is with the Xyz dimension. Originally, it was just like every other dimension, simply a slightly remixed version of its associated anime. In this case, Zexal. However, the Fusion Dimension, led by Leo Akaba, invaded as a means to try to reunite the disparate dimensions back into the original one that it was before Zark fractured it. The plan to reunite them all involved massacring the Xyz dimension to use their souls as fuel for the fusion process, which led to the dimension becoming a hellscape and the survivors like Yuto and Shay escaping to other dimensions to try to stop Leo's plan. It's been mentioned a few times, but the one for Vrains is the war between the humans and the Ignis. Going purely based on what's in the original story and not the alternate ending, the humans do end up winning. Each Ignis is picked off one by one until all that's left is I. And once Yusaku's done with him, the entire Ignis species has been wiped out. The only series thus far to avoid killing a whole ton of people is Sevens, which you'd think meant this new era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Wouldn't include Genocide, but no. The Sevens follow-up, prequel, sequel, midquel, Go Rush, features the Velgarian War, and I'll be straight with you, I don't know enough about Go Rush to really explain that one. Call it a blind spot, but after going through a whole rabbit hole of wiki articles, my head was spinning. Yu-Gi-Oh! In other mangas. Involving fans in the creative process of manga creation by accepting fan designs is a time-tested way to make readers way more attached to a story by giving them the chance to engage with it in a whole different way. It's because everybody wants to be like the f***ing king. Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself is no stranger to this. We talked at length about various cards that would be turned into the real deal that started as fan designs. But a funny inversion of that happens when newer manga that are released after Yu-Gi-Oh! Open up the floodgates to fan submissions. The kids who grew up reading and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Would see these open calls for character designs in the manga they were reading and would submit Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards as their characters. Importantly, these were not characters based on Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. These were just the monsters from the cards. They might as well have sent in a picture of Goku and said, "Put him in Mixmasters, please!" Among these include the manga adaptation of the series Deltora Quest, which in its fan-submitted creature design section included embodiment of Apophis. Another example of this exact thing is with the series Zatchbell. A few of the Momoto characters in the series were accepted from fan designs, and among the characters submitted was one kid's illustration of Woodland Sprite, currently avoiding the chair for his crimes in Duel Links. In these cases, it's honestly kind of adorable. These were kids excitedly trying to participate in their favorite series and make them cross over with their other favorite series. And in some cases, like the Zatchbell one, they would even get a little author note complimenting their design. And it's not like this was an uncommon practice, stealing designs to put in other series based on fan designs. As much as I love Kaneko Man, if the people behind Gold Lighten never came after Sunshine, I really couldn't make any argument. However, with this many examples, there has to be one that actually made it into the series, and wouldn't you guess it? There is! Enter Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro, author of Toriko. I'll mention it if you ask nicely, but it doesn't really apply to what we're talking about. Toriko had a section for fan submissions to turn into monsters in the story, and one submission was traced artwork of the monster Flyfang from the pack Generation Force. You can see it even has the little kid hallmarks of not really understanding what shading is, and unlike the others, this is much more directly a tracing of the original monster rather than a redrawing like Woodland Sprite or Apophis. And wouldn't you guess it actually made it into the series. Shima Bukuro liked the design enough and went ahead and included it. I don't really know what the legal recourse is for a series using a copied design submitted by a fan, since it's not like the author knew. Obviously he didn't, but maybe that's why they were redesigned in the anime to be turned into sawfish. Upper Deck Seal of Orichalcos. The Orichalcos arc of the original anime is one of the most interesting in the entire series. I didn't say good. Bringing back side characters, bringing the Pharaoh's moral character into question, separating the Pharaoh from his better half for most of the arc, there's a reason so many people look back on it fondly. One of the most interesting parts, though, was the titular field spell the arc revolved around. The Seal of Orichalcos is a super interesting card for its effects on gameplay and the lore baked into it. Allowing for an additional row of monsters to summon for an even bigger wave to beat through, the flat damage boost, and the biggest of them all, the soul wager that came along with it. The loser of a duel where the seal is activated loses their soul, and it gets sent to Darts for him to use to fuel the Leviathan's revival. This made every duel feel important and dangerous. Even if the heroes didn't want to, they had to potentially kill somebody by taking their souls to get closer to their goals. And every duel brought the villain's plan closer to reality. Seeing players like Joey try to think of a way to save people like Rex and Mai from having their souls taken makes for really compelling writing. And it's easy to see why this card in particular stuck with so many people. But what if you wanted to use it? You could be trusted. You won't use it for evil, right? It would take a long time for a proper Seal of Orichalcos to be printed, but it would eventually come out in the TCG exclusive pack, Legendary Collection 3, Yugi's World. Only in America would we sanction a card that can kill children. The card was hotly anticipated, and hyped up by a promo image saying that the text was just a placeholder. Because the real effect was so powerful, the card burst into flames when the effect was written on it. They wanted you to know that this card was going to be insanely strong. And when it was finally printed, this shit sucks. The Seal of Orichalcos is ass, super ass, turbo ass, championship edition ass. This thing is sucking doo-doo batter through a straw straight from the spigot, oh my god! Positive effects. It gives you 500 attack to all your monsters. It was immune to effect destruction, and it protected your weakest monster from battle. Okay. Negatives. Destroys all the special summoned monsters you control when it's played, locks out the extra deck, and can only be activated once per duel. The paper didn't burn because the effect was too strong, it was suicide to preserve its dignity. Get this trash effect off of me! All of the Orichalcos support cards were terrible. Shunaros, Divine Serpent Ge, both complete trash, but those didn't have the expectation that the seal did. It didn't even line up with the anime version. Not just playing monsters in the back row, the no extra deck rule contradicts the Rex duel where he summons a fusion monster. Most importantly, it can't kill people. What's the point of printing the card without the soul steal effect? That's the entire appeal. Well, it wasn't the only version of the seal that has ever existed, as prior to this, all the way back in the early 2000s, there was a proper Seal of Orichalcos. This was the Upper Deck Seal of Orichalcos, a version printed for the Duel the Master event that took place at Upper Deck Ran national tournaments. This was a proper seal, coming with the back row effect, damage boost, had the additional effect to discard itself to negate and destroy anything, and was totally unrespondable and invincible. And to top it all off, it even let you kill your opponent if they lost. Of course, this could also be you as well, but live by the sword, die by the sword. You take the good with the bad. This version only exists in limited quantities, as only 15 were ever printed and were given out to Upper Deck Research and Development as a keepsake. A card whose rarity can't even really be quantified since it was never released to the public in any form. but if one ever did turn up, it undoubtedly would be one of the most valuable cards of all time. Seawatts. Minecraft is a game I f***ing hate. You don't know me well enough to know why I hate it so much. I just hate it so goddamn much. As for what this has to do with Yu-Gi-Oh!, I could talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Minecraft mod that adds a modified crafting table to the game that allows you to play games a la Dueling book with the manual play, but instead I wanted to talk about a popular Minecraft YouTuber, Seawatts. Seawatts' channel has existed for a long time, but it wouldn't start uploading frequently until 2021, with a focus on Minecraft challenges. Playing the Bed Wars game mode without being able to place blocks, only being able to walk on sand, being able to talk to mobs, this found a super fast audience who enjoyed his content. The content he'd eventually become much more well known for, though, was actually a different genre of video called Minecraft storytelling. Kind of like machinimas from back when I was a kid, these were videos that used Minecraft as a medium to tell a story, like the story of Herobrine or The First Wandering Traveler. These are both videos Seawatts made, and they're two of his most popular. Eventually, Seawatts would even make his way into the most popular Minecraft narrative series in recent memory, Parkour Civilization. Thanks to his own success and his role in Parkour Civilization, this has led him to nearly 2 million subscribers and loads of fan art, either of him normally or in his Parkour Civilization persona. It's some really impressive artwork. A lot of very talented people enjoy what he makes and have poured their appreciation into some really pretty art. Except if you noticed, it's kind of familiar. Not immediately noticeable, but if you look at the original model these pieces of art are based on, it might make more sense. Seawatts' Minecraft avatar is Yugi! Specifically, it's the Pharaoh Atem from the Millennium World arc, but it's just him. The lower fidelity of a Minecraft model, though, has led to a loss of a lot of the details that make Atem Atem, like the purple highlights and the yellow bits going along with the crown he wears. I discovered this by accident because God knows I'm not watching Minecraft videos, but I was floored when I realized that all of this fan art was for a character nobody even knew they were drawing. This isn't even the only case of this happening in Minecraft. Stampy Longhead is one of the biggest Minecraft YouTubers ever, and one of even fewer to not be a criminal, and his character is Fidget from Dust and Elysian Tale. Big Dog.
Top 10 fucking big dogs. Number 10, Summoned Dog. Number 6, Bark Magician. Number 8, oh, it's Sword Fisher. Number 7, Rude Schnauzer. Number 6, Black Labrador Soldier. Number 5, Exodia. Number 4, Ultimate Dragon. Number 3, Pendulum Machine. Number 2, Celtic Guardian. And number 1, you already know.